better than Kate Moody to join us live in the studio. Great to see you, Kate.
Hi, Mark.
Now then, Volkswagen is reportedly planning major job cuts as it struggles to turn around its business.
Tens of thousands of job cuts, Mark, a 10% pay cut across the board, and 3 factories all set to be closed in Germany. That's what the company has told staff representatives this Monday. The head of the Employee Council said the plan was, quote, serious and should not be misconstrued as saber-rattling in the union's ongoing negotiations over pay. Now, the Volkswagen Group has around 300,000 employees in Germany and 10 plants. It's not clear which of those factories could be targeted in this restructuring. Management said it would formally put forward its cost-cutting plans on Wednesday, when a second round of wage talks is due to kick off and third quarter results are due to be published. Now, the head of the VW brand division said the group was not earning enough money and was dealing with higher energy, material and personnel costs. Thomas Schaefer said German factories were not productive enough, operating at 25 to 50% more than targeted costs and making them twice as expensive to operate as the competition. He said, quote, this calculation cannot work in the long term. Now, if confirmed, those cuts and closures would represent a bigger than expected overhaul and both a symbolic and literal blow to German industry. VW unions have already threatened strikes for later this year as their pay talks stalled, and employees this Monday said they were worried about their future.
These are very drastic cuts, and they obviously create fear. We have to see how we can feed our families and what's next for this region. This has consequences for us personally, but also for the region and for Germany.
The mood in my sector is extreme. First there was fear, then there was disappointment because we'd never seen anything like it at Volkswagen, and now there's anger. Our colleagues are definitely ready to support us.
Separately, metal workers and electrical engineers across Germany are expected to strike on Tuesday as they negotiate pay rises. Staff at carmaker Porsche are also expected to join in those walkouts. Across the Atlantic, another struggling industrial giant is trying to boost its coffers. Boeing has launched a stock offering, hoping to raise up to $19 billion for its $90 million in common stock and $5 billion in depository shares. Shares closed down nearly 3%, just under $151 this Monday. Last week, the aerospace giant confirmed more than $6 billion in losses for the third quarter, and it saw factory workers reject its latest pay offer as they voted to continue a 6-week-long strike that has halted production of many of its aircraft. Earlier this month, TikTok announced it had fired around 500 employees in Malaysia whose job it was to delete inappropriate content. Many of those will now be replaced by a cheaper, more controversial option, artificial intelligence. France 24 has met with one of the young TikTok employees who was fired by ByteDance, the Chinese company that owns TikTok. This report from Kuala Lumpur.
Raj loved working for TikTok, where he spent 2 very happy years as a content moderator for the video sharing app. But the young Malaysian was abruptly fired at the end of August. Still in shock, he spoke to us anonymously and accused TikTok of secretly replacing its moderators with AI.
We can see many violent contents such as child abuse, rape, murders. When we are watching a video, the AI will suggest policies that we should take for the video.
TikTok employees initially welcomed the extra technological help, but 2 years later, hundreds of them have been laid off, allegedly for performing poorly at work. Yet Raj was a model employee who last year won this award.
AI can perform more work than me, but that does not mean you can just simply throw us away. Since your beginning, we humans have been your workforce. We have contributed. We have built the foundation of the company. We should be treated with much more respect.
TikTok hasn't responded to our request for an interview. It's a highly sensitive issue, as the layoffs are part of a wider plan to improve content moderation. The company employs 110,000 people globally, but about 80% of problematic content is removed without intervention by human moderators. The sackings were unavoidable, according to this AI specialist, who believes that moderating social media content can be bad for employees' mental health.
When you see people killing themselves, hurting children, hurting old people. Looking at negative things throughout 8 hours of your life, 5 times a week for 2 years is never good. AI can filter through the content moderation without getting hurt.
TikTok employees in Malaysia who are now out of a job may find that hard to accept. And the firm's tens of thousands of other employees could be wondering if they're next.
Indeed, employees all around the world in all sorts of different industries, Mark, wondering if artificial intelligence is out to get our jobs.
Kate Moody, thank you for that. Kate Moody with all the business. As
Let's go
always.
to the Pacific Northwest now and look closely at this. Police want to know who is behind the wheel of that car for setting fire to ballot boxes. They believe the driver of that car is tied to at least 2 incidents at ballot boxes in Portland, Oregon and Vancouver, Washington. Let's go to CBS News Homeland Security and Justice reporter Nicole Sganga. Thank you so much for joining us on the stream. You just spoke to police. What did you learn from them?
Reed, good to be with you. These incidents have been tied to that dark gray Volvo sedan you see in surveillance images there. It shows the car pulling over at a Dropbox location in Portland, Oregon, moments before the fire began. And security personnel in nearby Vancouver, Washington, found that ballot box smoking in the early hours of Monday, alerting police. Now, the fire suppression system inside that Dropbox failed. That's why the flames were not immediately extinguished. Hundreds of ballots there destroyed. But in Portland, Oregon, where a similar incident did happen, that fire suppression system worked, so only 3 ballots were damaged there, and officials have already tracked down those voters. But the suspect still at large, and complicating this investigation, there was no front license plate on the vehicle, and police say the suspect's car had an unknown rear plate.
Maybe on purpose. Okay, so Nicole, razor-thin margins, we know this. Every vote counts, especially this election cycle. You just spoke with the auditor as well. What's the fate of the votes that were burned or damaged?
Yeah, the county auditor in Clark County, that's the home of Vancouver, Washington, tells me that, again, hundreds of ballots damaged. They won't have an exact number until later today. Officials are actually waiting for some of those ballots to dry after the fire was extinguished before they can get that exact number. Here's what to know, though. Those who dropped ballots in that drop box in Vancouver's Salmon Creek have been advised to check their ballot status online. They can do that at votewa.gov, and voters impacted can contact the county elections office or submit a request online at the same website for a new ballot. Now, meanwhile, Reed, we should point out, police say they have stepped up patrols around these ballot boxes, and officials in Clark County say they'll also assign ballot box observers to watch their 23 ballot drop boxes countywide there around the clock, 24/7, up until Election Day. The county will also assign election officials to pick up ballots at drop boxes more frequently.
All right, so the Department of Homeland Security is now warning that so-called threat actors are likely to leverage claims of election fraud to drive violence before and after Election Day. It's almost crazy to think we're even talking about these things. But what more can you tell us about these warnings?
Reed, that's right. And the bulletin was published just yesterday by DHS's Office of Intelligence and Analysis. It warned that some are calling for violence in online forums associated with domestic violent extremists. This as a response to election fraud narratives. Those threats are primarily targeting election officials or voting infrastructure. And federal investigators assess that a contested or a close election or even unforeseen events on Election Day that delay vote counting, any technological or administrative errors could heighten the threat environment here in the U.S. DHS warning that some individuals online are now also calling for the sabotage of ballot drop boxes, circulating their methods on these online forums. Now, this internal bulletin has been distributed to law enforcement nationwide, and it's part of the reason we're seeing an increase in police presence around voting locations and those drop boxes, not only in Washington state and in Oregon, but nationwide. Reed.
That's why your Homeland Security and Justice beat as a reporter is so vital to our organization. Nicole, thank you so much.
From the comments made regarding Puerto Rico at the Trump rally is being felt here in Rochester.
Yeah, the comments angered many within the Latino community. News 10 NBC's Tom Kowalski spoke with a Latino leader about how the Hispanic population is feeling.
There's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
That's the controversial joke made by comedian Tony Hinchcliffe at Trump's Madison Square Garden rally on Sunday. It, among other statements made at the rally, are being felt not just across the nation, but across the state, including here in Rochester.
I'm Puerto Rican. My father was born on the island, so, God rest his soul. He's turning in his grave over statements like this.
According to the U.S. Census, about 20% of Rochester's population identifies as Latino, including City Council President Miguel Melendez.
Yeah, for me, this isn't a partisan issue. This is very much a disrespect to our community issue. And, with 40,000 Latinos here in Rochester, 80,000 roughly in Monroe County, and even larger numbers in the Finger Lakes, to have that kind of rhetoric happen in our state and to have that conversation happening on a national stage now where Latinos are once again villainized, to me was troubling.
The Trump campaign responded saying, quote, "This joke does not reflect the views of President Trump or the campaign." Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, says the country needs to move on from the joke.
I haven't seen the joke. Maybe it's a stupid racist joke, as you said. Maybe it's not. I haven't seen it. I'm not going to comment on the specifics of the joke. But I think that we have to stop getting so offended at every little thing in the United States of America. I'm so over it.
This affects all Latinos. This was not a Puerto Rican issue. The rhetoric at a national scale is hurting people locally. And there were very angry people today. I've talked to many people on the phone and also on a Zoom call that we had, and people are really frustrated with the national rhetoric that's happening. And this is 1 week before an election.
Tom Kowalski, News 10 NBC.
We did also reach out to the Monroe County Republican Committee, but we were unable to get a response.
There's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah, I think it's called Puerto Rico.
A controversial joke during a Trump rally at New York's Madison Square Garden. Now, many Latinos in Central Florida are condemning the comments and say it could be changing the way people vote. And as the election gets closer, what could this mean for the former president? News 6's Stephanie Rodriguez explains.
I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah, I think it's called Puerto Rico.
Comedian Tony Hinchcliffe took Puerto Ricans by surprise with his words about the island of enchantment.
A lot of people are going to change their vote.
Kissimmee Trump supporter Robert Figueroa tells me he's rallied many Boricuas behind the former president, but now he's considering not casting a ballot at all.
I was going to vote for Donald Trump, and when this guy came out in New York, he started talking about Puerto Ricans, that we were garbage.
He says he wants to hear from the former president. If you had the opportunity to speak directly to Mr. Trump, what would you say?
I would tell Donald Trump, don't put people talking about bad Puerto Ricans about us, and then you're not going to win, because we'll make you win.
Trump's team called it a joke, but community leaders are taking it very serious.
¿Cómo se siente ser puertorriqueño y escuchar esos comentarios?
Mira, fue como una bofetada.
Jorge Figueroa is the president of the Puerto Rican Chamber of Commerce, representing hundreds of businesses in Central Florida.
Something that do not belong in politics. It was definitely not a joke. And all of those who thought it was funny, they it shows their true face, and it's nothing less than pure racism.
He and others held a press conference to condemn the comment and push Latinos to the polls.
You don't have to be Puerto Rican to see what happened here. There's no excuses for what we saw.
In Kissimmee, Stephanie Rodriguez, Getting Results, News 6.
Iran has executed Iranian-German national Jamshid Sharmad, who was a convict of terrorism charges. This is what Iranian media has reported. Sharmad, a resident of the United States, was sentenced to death in 2023 for his alleged role in a 2008 blast that claimed 14 lives. The execution invited a sharp response from German officials who claimed that Sharmad was denied a fair trial. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz took to social media, labeling the execution as a scandal and highlighting Sharmad's lack of defense during his trial. German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock expressed similar sentiments, stating that the execution would have serious consequences for Iran's relations with Germany. Ghazel Sharmad, daughter of Jamshid Sharmad, called for proof of her father's death and demanded accountability for the Iranian government's treatment of him. In a post on social media X, she stated that her father's body should be returned and urged for harsh consequences for the Iranian authorities. Shahmad was arrested in 2020 in Dubai, where he was taken into custody by Iranian security forces. He faced allegations of directing terrorist operations from the United States. The Iranian regime has accused him of collaborating with Western intelligence agencies and claimed his activities threatened national security. Human rights organizations have flagged the proceedings against Shahmad as grossly unfair. Amnesty International highlighted that he was denied access to an independent lawyer and faced significant barriers in his defense. A government-appointed lawyer reportedly demanded payment from Shahmad's family to provide adequate representation.
Our top story tonight on Gravitas is about Israel's new laser defense system. Ever since Hamas breached Israeli air defenses on October 7, 2023, overwhelming its Iron Dome, questions have been raised over whether the famed air defense system has lost its missile detection ability. As a result, now Israel is working on a new laser system that can possibly take down rockets. a new weapon that can essentially improve Israel's defense capabilities as it fights battles on multiple fronts. Here's what we know about this new weapon. It's called Iron Beam. It is a new laser system that can basically intercept rockets, drones and mortars at negligible cost, to be operational next year after an accelerated manufacturing process. Basically, it is a shield that would supplement the existing air defenses. You see, Israeli air defenses, in a way, have been stretched to the limit by more than a year of the fighting with Iran and its proxies in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Syria, Iraq, Yemen. Now, how does the Iron Beam work, though? According to reports, Iron Beam is designed to disable incoming projectiles by heating them using a high-energy laser, as opposed to shooting them down with missiles. The new system has an effective range of between hundreds of meters and several kilometers. But to be clear here, the Iron Beam is not meant to replace the Iron Dome or Israel's other air defense systems. The Iron Beam is meant to supplement and complement the Iron Dome. Its range would complement the short-range Iron Dome rocket interceptor, according to state-owned Rafael Advanced Defense Systems, which is the manufacturer of both types of weaponry. Israel's Elbit Systems Limited has said that the Israel Defense Ministry has awarded it a contract worth about $200 million to supply the Iron Beam lasers, whereas it costs about $60,000 to shoot down a projectile using the Iron Dome. Iron Beam's price tag will be as little as $5. The price of a Tamir missile, which is the interceptor launched by Iron Dome, is about $100,000. In comparison, the cost of interception using a laser shield is the price of the electricity used to launch it, which means that laser interception will transform the economy of air defense. That's because missiles and drones are cheaper to deploy than to shoot down. The laser system would also eliminate the danger of interceptor debris causing damage. Amid the conflict, Iron Beam is being manufactured at an accelerated pace and will enter operational service by next year. On Monday, while announcing the move, Israel Defense Ministry's Director General, Eyal Zamir, said, and I'm quoting here, "The tiding of the start of a new era in the battlefield, the laser era." Here's what else we know at this point. The Iron Beam was presented for the first time in February 2014 at the Singapore Air Show, after it proved its capabilities in a series of tests in southern Israel about 3 years ago. It entered into operational development and adaptation to the battlefield. According to the Israeli Defense Ministry, Israel is among the first countries in the world to succeed in using powerful laser technology to develop a working air defense system and to demonstrate interceptions in operational scenarios. Since its development started, the high-power laser has reportedly proven more powerful than what the Israeli Defense Ministry's team initially aimed for. They say that as long as there is a constant source of energy for the laser, there is no risk of ever running out of ammunition. But you see, there is a downside to this as well. It does not function well in times of low visibility, including heavy cloud cover or other inclement weather conditions. And for that reason, the Israeli Defense Ministry intends to also mount the system on an airplane, which would basically help get around the limitation by putting the system above the clouds. But that is still a few more years off. You see, Israel's aerial defenses have largely been developed in conjunction with its key ally, the US. Recently, the US has also, in fact, deployed one of its own THAAD interceptors to help Israel fend off potential ballistic missile attacks from Iran. We told you about this. Israel, for that matter, is also expecting a $5.2 billion in emergency funding from the US, some of which would be used for the Iron Beam. And as far as the question of the Iron Beam's success is concerned, we will have to wait and watch to get that answer.
Rescue workers sift through the rubble in an effort to find victims and survivors. At least 2 houses were completely destroyed here in Kharkiv in Russian airstrikes just before 3 a.m. local time on Tuesday. About 20 other buildings were also hit. It followed other strikes on Monday night, which hit the centre of the city, particularly the renowned Dershprom building famous for being the USSR's first skyscraper.
This building is known in many countries around the world. Many people come here to visit it. It's in all the architecture guides all over the world.
Meanwhile, both NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed that North Korean troops had been deployed closer to Ukraine's border within Russia.
Today, I can confirm that North Korean troops have been sent to Russia and that North Korean military units have been deployed to the Kursk region.
3,000 already on the territory of Russia, 3,000 of North Korean soldiers. We think the information from our intelligence, we think that they will have 12,000.
The news of North Korean troops being deployed was initially announced earlier this month by the South Korean government. Seoul, a major arms exporter, is now considering supplying Ukraine with weapons, which it had previously declined to do. North Korea's foreign minister is in Russia on her second visit in 6 weeks. Though Pyongyang has not confirmed sending troops to be deployed in Ukraine, it is said that were it to do so, a deployment would be in line with international law.
Now, Ukrainians are retreating in the face of Russian army advance as it claims new ground every day, while the West claims that North Korean soldiers have already started moving to the front lines along with the Russians. Kyiv is staring at an acute shortage of manpower. Our next story brings you all the details. Take a look.
Ukrainian forces are particularly stretched in the Donetsk region, where superior Russian firepower and numbers is forcing Kiev to give up entire villages and towns. The fiercest clashes are taking place in Kurakhov and Pokrovsk areas, where Ukrainian troops are resorting to desperate measures to halt Russian advance.
So, there were different moments in my service, shellings hitting landmines by car, and sometimes I suffered from panic attacks. It was really difficult to go on a combat mission.
The relentless shelling of Sumy and Chernihiv regions underscores the intensity of Moscow's assault. President Zelensky has been appealing to the US for more weapons and support to bolster Ukraine's defenses, but he faces an immediate crisis: finding enough soldiers to hold the line. With nearly all willing recruits already enlisted, Ukraine's recruitment efforts are faltering as eligible men are increasingly evading the draft by hiding or fleeing the country. Kiev has intensified its search for new troops, conducting spot checks at high-profile venues, from concerts to popular cafes, underscoring the rising urgency of Ukraine's manpower needs. Meanwhile, resentment is building up among the battle-weary soldiers who have served on the front lines for nearly 3 years, only to watch others escape military service. Ukraine recently lowered the draft age to 25. It also introduced harsher penalties for draft torture, briefly boosting enlistment. The numbers, though, have waned since then. As the war enters its third year, Kiev confronts mounting pressure to share the burden of defense evenly and avert a crisis of morale within its ranks. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
China are expected to complete the process of military disengagement across the line of actual control. As per reports, the military disengagement between the two countries is taking place at two friction points, that's Demchok and Depsang plains in eastern Ladakh. Reports say once the troops have disengaged and the temporary structures have been dismantled, both sides are going to conduct joint verification. It will be both land-based as well as include aerial verification. Non-hostile patrolling is set to resume after both sides complete the disengagement process. The nuclear-armed neighbors struck a deal earlier this week on patrolling the frontier. This paved the way for the first formal talks in 5 years between Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping when they met on the sidelines of the BRICS summit in Russia. The border standoff between India and China began in eastern Ladakh along the LAC in 2020. It was sparked by the Galwan Valley clashes. This agreement is important because the Chinese side until a year ago showed reluctance to even discuss Depsang Plains in Demchok, while it agreed on disengagement at other friction points. That's namely Galwan Valley, Hot Springs, Gogra, north and south banks of Pangong Tso.
awesome or totally frightening? Look at this. China's military has released this video of a four-legged robot marching through a field with an automatic rifle mounted on its back. The Chinese state broadcaster calls it the newest member of China's urban combat operations. The robot dogs are programmed to conduct reconnaissance, identify the enemy, and strike the target. If that thing comes around the corner and if you're on the other side, you're done.
Yeah, over.